Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to have you here. My name is Mohammed Faiz, and I will be guiding you through this session. The topic we'll be exploring is the transformation of sentences, which is a fascinating area in language and grammar. Throughout this presentation, we'll look at different methods and examples of how sentences can be transformed to improve clarity and effectiveness. So, let's get started and dive into the world of sentence transformation. Let's take a closer look at the contents of today's lesson. First, we have the different types of sentences, which form the foundation of our discussion. Moving on, we explore how to transform sentences, a key skill in effective communication. We then examine the interchange of degrees of comparison, understanding how to shift between positive, comparative, and superlative forms. Next, we look at how affirmative and negative sentences can be interchanged, which is essential for clarity and emphasis. We also delve into the conversion of simple sentences into complex and compound sentences, expanding our ability to craft more nuanced expressions. The interchanging of affirmative and exclamatory sentences highlights how tone and emotion can be conveyed through sentence structure. Throughout, we'll see practical examples to reinforce these concepts. Finally, there's a focus on how to transform sentences while maintaining their meaning, which is a vital skill in both writing and speaking. All these points are interconnected, helping us develop a comprehensive understanding of sentence transformation and variation. This slide essentially sets the stage for mastering the art of sentence manipulation in English, which is crucial for effective communication. Today, we're going to talk about the main types of sentences in English. First, there's the simple sentence. This is the most basic kind, and it has just one clause. It usually contains a single idea or thought. Next, we have the compound sentence. This type combines two or more main clauses, often joined by words like and, but, or. It allows us to connect related ideas in a single sentence. Lastly, we have the complex sentence. This one includes one main clause and one or more subordinate clauses. These subordinate clauses add extra information or detail and are usually connected with words like because, although, or when. Understanding these different sentence types helps us craft clearer, more varied, and more engaging writing. It also ties into our overall goal of improving our communication skills in English. Let's talk about the transformation of sentences. What this really means is that we can change a simple sentence into a more complex one, like a compound or a complex sentence. This is usually done by expanding a single word or a phrase into a full clause, which adds more detail or explanation. Conversely, we can also simplify sentences by reducing a clause back into a single word or phrase. This way, we make sentences more concise. Understanding this flexibility is key because it allows us to vary our sentence structure and improve clarity, making our writing more engaging and precise. It's all about knowing when to expand and when to condense, which really ties into the overall goal of effective communication. Let's take a look at the sentence. It is too late to start a new lesson. As you can see, this sentence contains only one clause, which makes it a simple sentence. Now, the key point here is that the number of clauses in a sentence is actually equal to the number of finite verbs it contains. Finite verbs are important because they show tense and agreement with the subject. It's also worth noting that two infinitives and ing forms are not considered finite verbs, so they don't contribute to the clause count. This distinction helps us analyze sentence structure more accurately. Understanding this concept is crucial because it ties directly into how we transform sentences, whether we're simplifying, expanding, or combining ideas. Recognizing the clauses and finite verbs allows us to manipulate sentences effectively while maintaining clarity. So, as we continue, keep in mind how identifying clauses and finite verbs forms the foundation for transforming sentences correctly and confidently. Let's delve into the fascinating world of sentence transformation. On this slide, we're focusing on various ways to modify sentences to add variety, clarity, and emphasis. First, we have the interchange of degrees of comparison. This involves changing adjectives or adverbs to express different levels of quality or intensity, like switching from good to better or best. It helps us highlight differences or emphasize certain qualities. Next, converting simple sentences into compound sentences is a key skill. This involves joining two related ideas with coordinating conjunctions like and, but, or, making our writing more cohesive and flowing smoothly. We also explore the interchange of affirmative and exclamatory sentences. This allows us to express enthusiasm or surprise, transforming a simple statement into an exclamation, which adds emotional impact. Moving on, converting simple sentences into complex ones involves adding subordinate clauses to provide additional information or context, making our sentences richer and more detailed. Another important point is the interchange of negative and affirmative sentences. This is about understanding how to flip statements to change their tone or focus, which can be useful for emphasis or clarification. Finally, we look at transforming sentences using to into sentences with so, that. For example, the bag is too heavy to carry becomes the bag is so heavy that I can't carry it. This structure emphasizes the degree of something and its consequence. All these transformation techniques are essential tools in enhancing our language skills, connecting seamlessly to how we communicate more effectively and creatively. Let's talk about the interchange of the degrees of comparison. First, we have the positive degree, which is used to describe a quality without making any comparison. For example, I might say, I am as strong as he, to show that our strength is equal. Moving on, the positive form can also be used in a negative context, like, he is not stronger than I, emphasizing that he isn't stronger than me. Next, we have the comparative degree, which is used to compare two things directly. For instance, iron is more useful than any other metal. Here, we're comparing iron's usefulness to that of other metals. An important point to remember is that the comparative form often ends with or is paired with more or less. Finally, there's the superlative degree, which compares one thing to all others in a group. For example, iron is the most useful of all metals. This highlights iron's superiority in usefulness among metals. The superlative form usually ends with est or is combined with most or least. Connecting this to the overall theme, understanding how to properly use these degrees of comparison helps us communicate more clearly and precisely, especially when making comparisons or highlighting the qualities of different objects or concepts. Let's look at some examples of how we can interchange degrees of comparison without changing the core meaning of a sentence. First, consider the sentence, the airplane flies faster than birds. We can flip this around to say, birds do not fly as fast as an airplane. Both sentences express the same idea, but in different ways. This highlights how we can use different comparative structures to convey the same message. Next, take some beans are as nutritious as meat. We can also say, meat is not more nutritious than some beans. Again, the meaning remains the same, but the emphasis shifts slightly depending on how we structure the comparison. Another example is, Helen was more beautiful than any other woman. We can rephrase it as no other woman was so beautiful as Helen. This form emphasizes Helen's unique beauty in comparison. Similarly, with Hyderabad is one of the biggest Indian cities, we can say, very few Indian cities are as big as Hyderabad. This way, we're highlighting Hyderabad's size relative to other cities. Finally, Akbar was one of the greatest Indian kings, can be rephrased as Akbar was greater than most other Indian kings. This comparison helps us understand his stature in history. Overall, the key point here is that we have multiple ways to express the same comparison, allowing us to emphasize different aspects or simply vary our language for better clarity or style. This is an important skill in effective communication, especially in writing and speech, as it helps keep our language rich and engaging while maintaining the original meaning. Let's take a look at how we can express the same idea in two different ways, exclamatory and affirmative. For example, when we say, how beautiful this garden is, we're using an exclamatory sentence to show strong emotion or surprise. Similarly, how nice Dhoni played also expresses admiration with enthusiasm. And when I say, what a tasty ice cream, It's again an exclamatory way to highlight my feelings about the ice cream's taste. Now, on the other hand, we have the affirmative sentences. Instead of using exclamations, these are straightforward statements. For instance, "This garden is very beautiful." This sentence shares the same idea but in a calmer, more neutral tone. Likewise, "Donnie played really nice," and "Ice cream is extremely tasty" convey the same feelings but without the exclamation marks. The key point here is understanding how we can switch between expressing emotions through exclamations and stating facts through affirmatives. This interchange is important because it helps us vary our language based on context and the level of emotion we want to convey. Recognizing this pattern links back to our overall theme of effective communication, showing how different sentence structures can change the tone and impact of our message. Let's look at the concept of interchange of affirmative and negative statements. For example, if I say, "Brutus loved Caesar," that's an affirmative statement expressing a positive fact. Now, if I want to turn that into a negative, I could say, "Brutus was not without love for Caesar." This negative form emphasizes that Brutus did have some love for Caesar, just not necessarily in a straightforward way. Similarly, if I say, "They are unhappy in life," that's an affirmative statement describing their state. To express this negatively, I might say, "They are not happy in life." Notice how the negative form directly counters the positive, giving us a clear contrast. These shifts between affirmative and negative are important because they allow us to express nuances of meaning. They also help us see how the same idea can be framed differently, which is very useful in persuasive or descriptive language. In the context of our overall theme, understanding how language can be flexible and nuanced, this interchange shows how we can adjust the tone or emphasis of our message without changing the core idea. It's a powerful tool in effective communication. Now, let's look at how we can interchange affirmative and negative sentences to convey the same meaning in different ways. For example, in the first case, an affirmative sentence like, "I was doubtful whether it was you," can be turned into a negative one. "I was not sure that it was you." This change emphasizes the certainty or doubt differently, but the core idea remains the same. Similarly, take the sentence, "Everybody was present." That is an affirmative statement. Its negative version would be, "Nobody is absent." Notice how that shifts the focus from everyone being present to no one being absent, yet both communicate the same situation from different angles. In the next example, an affirmative sentence like "all cheered" can be transformed into a negative sentence, "There was no one present who did not cheer." This might sound a bit more detailed, but it effectively negates the absence of cheering. The key point here is that negative sentences can be rephrased into affirmative sentences, and vice versa, to suit the emphasis or tone we want to convey. This technique is useful not only for clarity, but also for variety in our expressions. It connects to the overall theme of understanding sentence structures and how to manipulate them for effective communication. Let's take a look at some examples of how we can interchange affirmative and negative sentences to express the same meaning. First, consider the sentence, "Only a millionaire can afford such luxuries." When we make it negative, it becomes, "None but a millionaire can afford such luxuries." This emphasizes that no one else but a millionaire has that ability. Next, take the sentence, "He failed to notice me when he came in." Its negative form is simply, "He did not notice me when he came in." This straightforward negation clarifies that the action of noticing did not happen. Moving on, "Every man makes mistakes sometimes" can be expressed negatively, as there is no man who does not make mistakes sometimes. This form highlights that making mistakes is universal among men. Similarly, "Everybody will admit that he did his best" can be turned into, "Nobody will deny that he did his best." Both sentences agree that the effort was recognized, just expressed differently. Finally, the sentence, "I care very little what he says about me," becomes, "I do not care what he says about me" in the negative form. This simplifies the statement but keeps the core meaning intact. The key takeaway here is that by changing positive sentences into their negative counterparts, we can reinforce the message while also practicing different grammatical structures. This is a useful skill that helps us communicate more effectively and precisely, fitting into the overall theme of mastering sentence transformation for clearer expression. Now, let's look at how we can convert simple sentences into compound sentences. On this slide, we start with a simple sentence. He must work very hard to make up for the lost time. This sentence clearly states a single idea, but sometimes we want to express ideas in a way that shows the relationship between two concepts. For example, we can say, in spite of his hard work, he did not succeed. Here, we're emphasizing that despite his effort, success was not achieved. Alternatively, we can combine the ideas to say, he must work hard and make up for the lost time. This version links the two actions directly, showing that working hard is connected to making up for the lost time. And finally, another way to express the same idea is, he worked hard, yet did not succeed. This highlights a contrast, showing that even though he put in effort, the outcome was still unsuccessful. The key point here is that transforming simple sentences into compound sentences allows us to express relationships like contrast, addition, or concession more clearly. This is especially useful when we want to connect ideas smoothly and make our writing or speech more engaging. Remember, the overall goal is to make our communication more precise and impactful. Let's look at some examples of how we can convert simple sentences into compound sentences. This is an important skill because it helps us connect ideas more smoothly and makes our writing more fluent. For instance, take the sentence, owing to drought the crop is short. To turn this into a compound sentence, we can say, there is drought and so the crop is short. Here, we've linked the cause and effect more clearly using, and so. Another example is little Jay sat in a corner, eating his Christmas cake. We can make it a compound sentence by saying, little Jay sat in a corner and ate his Christmas cake. Notice how we connect the two actions with and to show that they happen together. Now consider the men had not completed their work by sunset. We can rephrase it as, the sun set, and yet the men had not completed their work. This emphasizes the contrast between the sunset and the unfinished work, connecting two related ideas. Similarly, he must resign on pain of public dismissal can be transformed into, he must resign, or he will be publicly dismissed. This introduces a choice or consequence, linked by or. Finally, in spite of several efforts he failed, becomes, he made several efforts but failed. Here, but shows the contrast between his efforts and the outcome. The key takeaway is that converting simple sentences into compound sentences often involves using coordinating conjunctions like and, or, but, and phrases like and so, or yet. These tools help us combine ideas logically and make our writing more cohesive. This skill is essential because it connects ideas more naturally, making our communication clearer and more professional, which ties into the overall theme of mastering language and sentence structure. Let's now look at how we can convert simple sentences into complex ones. This is a crucial skill because it enriches our writing and makes it more sophisticated. For example, take the simple sentence, he confessed his crime. By adding a clause, we can make it more complex. He confessed that he was guilty. Notice how the second sentence provides more detail and context. Another example is, the management is thoroughly bad. We can turn this into a comparative statement. The management is as bad as it could be. This shows a different way to express the same idea with more emphasis and nuance. Similarly, consider the sentences about admission policies. Only Pakistanis are admitted here can be expanded to a conditional statement. If you are not a Pakistani, you cannot be admitted here. This adds a condition, making the sentence more informative and precise. The key takeaway here is that converting simple sentences into complex ones allows us to communicate more effectively. It helps us add details, show relationships, and express conditions or contrasts clearly. This skill is essential whether you're writing essays, reports, or giving presentations, as it helps make your language more engaging and comprehensive. Connecting this to our overall theme, mastering sentence complexity enhances our ability to craft clear, impactful messages. Let's look at some examples of how we can convert simple sentences into more complex ones. The key idea here is to add more detail or context, which often makes our sentences richer and more informative. For instance, take the sentence, "I rejoice at his good fortune." We can turn this into a complex sentence by saying, "I rejoice that he has good fortune." Notice how we've added a clause starting with that to explain the reason for my rejoicing. Next, consider the sentence, "Allowing him alone, the rest of us waited outside." We can make this more complex by saying, "He alone entered," which emphasizes that only he went in, giving it a more precise focus. Another example is, "The prince was to be found in the hottest battle." To make this complex, we say, "The prince was to be found where the battle was the hottest." Here, we've introduced a relative clause that gives more information about the location, making the sentence more descriptive. Finally, look at the sentence, "Considering the difficulties of his position, he has acted admirably." We can transform this into a complex sentence like, "If we consider the difficulties of his position, he has acted admirably." This adds a conditional element, inviting us to think about the circumstances influencing his actions. These examples show how adding clauses or phrases can deepen the meaning and clarity of our sentences, which is essential for effective and sophisticated writing. Remember, the goal is to connect ideas smoothly, making our communication clearer and more engaging.